Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so pleased that you're able to join us today. We hope you're all set up and maybe even brought some snacks to go on our little adventure to the Mediterranean. My name's Stephanie, and I'm the marketing manager for Explore in Australia and New Zealand, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. So, what can you expect from the Gens of the Mediterranean event today? We're going to give you a short introduction into who we are, and then we'll come to two of my colleagues who will transport you to the fantastic places and talk about their experiences, as well as giving some key practical info on what to expect. We'll finish with some time to answer questions and tell you about an exciting offer that we have and also a prize draw. Before we get started, though, just a few little tips that we want to make sure that everything runs as smoothly as possible. Everyone's automatically on mute, but we'd still love you to make use of the chat and the Q&A features down the bottom there. So in the chat, if everyone can please tell us what location they're viewing from and if you've ever been on one of our Explore adventures and any kind of European highlights that you're looking to visit in the coming months, that would be great. You'll also notice next to the chat box is a Q&A. If at any time during today's events you have questions, please use the Q&A function and we'll have our experts answering these questions throughout the next hour or so. We'll also be discussing some key Q&As at the end of the presentation. But if you do miss anything and you need to duck out, there's no worries. We're recording this entire event and we'll be sharing the recording along with a summary of the most frequently asked questions. And you should get an email with all the offers and a link to the video by the end of the week. So some of you may know about us and some of you may not be familiar with us at all. A quick summary of who we are. Here at Explore, we run over 350 small group adventures to more than 100 countries worldwide. We have our classic discovery trips as well as walking, cycling, and family tours. Now, when we say small, we mean an average group size of 11 with a maximum of 16 on any one tour. These tours are designed to get you off the beaten track with expert tour leaders and to a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Our motto is, if traveling lets you see the world, then exploring helps you to feel it. Don't just travel, explore. So with that said, why would you choose Explore for your next adventure? Well, we've recently received a Platinum Trusted Service Award from FIFO because our customer reviews are over 4.5 out of 5. And we've also just become a B certified corporation, two things we're extremely proud of. On our trips, you'll see a mix of famous sites and hidden gems that others miss or don't even know about. As travelers, we want to experience a country, not merely just observe it. So we'll take you closer to a country, its culture and people, often unscripted, spontaneous, impossible to replicate ways. Our fabulous tour leaders will use their expert insider knowledge and local connections to make the most of unexpected opportunities. So you'll be invited to watch the sunrise from a lighthouse maybe, or even join a homemade dinner at a farmhouse owned by locals. Our average group size of 11 means it's just big enough to meet like-minded people, but small enough to get to the heart of the destination. Finally, sustainability is at the core of everything that we do. It's the heart of what we do, and we will only work with partners who have the same values as us. In terms of who will be talking to you today, I'm delighted that I'll be joined by two of our fabulous team members, Ali and Becky. They're presenting and will also be answering any questions that you have as we go along. The trips that we'll be talking about today are some of the greatest gems across Europe. So we'll be talking about the islands of Malta, Gozo, Sicily, and the islands in Greece. We'll be covering cultural, foodie, and natural highlights of the trips, and we'll also talk about our own personal tips and favorites. Now, the last trip on the presentation today is the Greek islands, and it's one that I am super interested in. I've seen several of the European islands in my time, but never Greece. The product team have raved about this trip, so I'm extremely excited to hear all about it. First off, I'd like to introduce our first presenter, which is Ali Butler. She will be talking to you about Malta and Gozo tours. Over to you, Ali.
Hi everyone. So thanks for that, Steph. Yes, the first tour I'm going to talk you through, go into a little bit of detail, is going to be the Malta and Gozo Discovery. So it's a 1-week holiday that we have. and we visit 2 of the 3 islands that make up the archipelago of Malta. Just to give you an idea, they're really, really small. And actually Camino, the island in between the 2 that we visit, has a population of only 2 people. And yes, to give you an idea of scale, London is 5 times bigger than the entire Maltese archipelago. So it's absolutely tiny, but you'd be surprised how much we can pack into these tiny islands. Our trip starts at the airport, and we normally meet at the coffee shop in the arrivals hall, and we're driven to the ferry port, and we take the short ferry crossing to Gozo, and our holiday spends 2 days on Gozo before moving back to Malta for the last 5 days. But to give you an idea again, that the size of the islands, that's actually the longest drive we do on the whole trip, is that airport transfer, which takes about 45 minutes. It's about 30 kilometers. Now we can spend a little bit longer on the coach sometimes depending on traffic, but all journeys are short. So everything is easily done as a little day trip from our base hubs. So in Gozo, we stay in a place called Malta, which is a beautiful beachfront mini resort. It's got a small little harbour, lovely restaurants, a few little shops, and it's just the perfect place to be. We've got a lovely sea view from the hotel, and actually the hotel has got the most comprehensive breakfast buffet I've seen anywhere in Europe. They literally have everything. And then after our 2 days sightseeing on Gozo, we pop over to Malta and we stay in Salima for 5 nights, and we explore the island from that base. And Salima is just outside of the capital. It's got excellent transport links, and also a great selection of restaurants and shops. And again, it's a seafront location. We're on the main promenade. So it's, yeah, a beautiful location to be for those 5 nights. So what are the highlights of these islands? Well, I was lucky enough to go out there November last year, and I thought that the weather perhaps wouldn't be so favourable that late in the season, but it's beautiful and the climate is good all year round. And the first thing I did on the island of Gozo was visit the town of Victoria, and it's the old capital. It was once called Rabat, but it changed its name in 1887 when Queen Victoria had her golden jubilee. They're a big royalist fan of our royal family, so it took on the name Victoria at that point. And we have a guided tour through Victoria, through all the narrow streets. We get to see all the medieval and Baroque architecture, and the wrought iron balconies that Malta and Gozo are famous for. We'll grab a snack, so you can see that little picture there of a pastry. That's called a pizzizi, and it's a flaky pastry. It's kind of normally filled with ricotta and peas, and we'll have one of those in one of the little squares before we head up to the citadel, which is the picture on the right. And it's a fortified city with a really rich history. It dates back to Neolithic times. And it has been inhabited and built upon throughout the ages. It shows, it's a real testament for the island's resilience throughout history. Pretty much everybody has invaded and tried to take control at some point. The views from the top of the citadel are fantastic. So yeah, that was my first highlight, was seeing Victoria and the citadel. Next for me was the salt pans. So we walk downhill down to the seafront and then walk along the coast past the most remarkable limestone cliffs. And in front of all of that, you see these flat pans where there's traditional salt production continuing. So for centuries, these sort of rock cut platforms fill with seawater. The wind and the sun evaporate the water out, and what's left is the salt, and people gather the salt, or the salt farmers, and they export it. It's a big export for Malta. If you are Maltese, you normally go direct to the producer and buy it, but the conditions need to be just right. If there's too windy, then too much dust from the rock blows in and they have to start again. But it's fascinating, so you get to learn about that and see it, and it's a really interesting sight. On Gozo, I also loved Ramla Bay. So that's the bottom right picture, and it's a beautiful red golden sand beach. And just to the left of it, there's the remains of Calypso's cave. And that's quite famous due to Homer's poem, The Odyssey. And it's said to be the cave where Calypso kept Odysseus captive for 7 years. So we see the remains of that. We walk down to the beach, have a bit of time to relax on the beach or sit in the beachside taverna. And lastly, on Gozo, this church, the Taupino Church, it's known, people worshipping there the Virgin Mary, and they believe that she is healing them and making better all of their ailments. And there's a huge collection of photos and letters of thanks for people that have had serious illness or difficulty and have been healed by praying to her. So this church is quite a pilgrimage site, and interesting to see. And it's a very imposing structure just jutting out into the landscape as well. So that's my whistle-stop tour of Gozo. So next on to Malta, and my highlights here were the capital of Valletta. We wander the streets of Valletta again, like Victoria, admiring the architecture. There's fantastic views of the Grand Harbour and the three cities, but the absolute standout must see is the St. John's Co-Cathedral, and it's a Baroque-style church that was built by the Knights of St. John, and it houses famous paintings, a couple of Caravaggios. One of them is painted directly onto the wall. It's the beheading of St. John the Baptist, and a lot of people go to see that famous painting. But the floor of the cathedral as well is it's like a carpet of marble tombstones and memorial slabs, and is the burial place for a lot of the prominent members of the Order of St. John, and the Grand Masters and Knights. But beautifully decorated church, really interesting history, well worth a visit when you're in Valletta. Next for me was the Grand Harbour cruise. Now I love a boat trip. Put me on a boat and I'm more than happy. And it's really interesting to see these famous sites from the water level. It gives you a different aspect, some interesting photos, and I enjoy being on a boat. So that was all lovely. And the Grand Harbour itself is fascinating. There's lots of history, and you have a commentary on the boat, and he talks about the history, and that's great, but also goes through some other things of interest. So they have a huge dry dock there that's capable of hosting the biggest cruise liners in the world to do any repairs. Also, the shipyards are interesting, the dry docks are, and he also talks about what movies are filmed there. So like I said, I was there in November, and they're filming the latest Gladiator at the moment. You could see the film set. They also filmed Troy there, and Popeye, and all the Popeye set is still there, and TV shows like Game of Thrones have been filmed around there. So it's interesting on many levels, the ancient history, the modern cruise ships, and also the filming industry as well. And next was our visit to Malta Sunripe. So we have lunch with a local farmer, a guy called Joseph, and he grows all of his own produce, and he makes all sorts of delicious treats from what he's grown. So he makes jams, he makes chutneys, he makes cheese, he makes wine, and we have a big buffet lunch there and try all of these Mediterranean treats that he makes. And it's absolutely fantastic. We get to see his wine cellar, but also learn from him about the processes that have been passed on from generation to generation. Farming in Malta is not easy. There's not much soil, and every time it rains, the soil washes off into the sea. So there's all sort of terrace landscaping, and water conservation methods and things that are very, very interesting to learn about. And it's a really delicious lunch. So that was a highlight for me. Before I went to Malta, one of the things that I was really looking forward to was the water and the sea. So Malta is renowned for its crystal clear, sort of turquoise, azure, blue waters, excellent visibility. It's really popular with divers and snorkelers. And we do a boat trip to the Blue Grotto, which is a famous cave formation. So there's a few opportunities to get out and see this water, go for a swim, snorkel. But this boat trip to the Blue Grotto was a highlight for me. And then lastly, about these islands, I just want to say that you can't really go there without visiting the oldest freestanding structures in the world. So these megalithic temples on Gozo and Malta are 5,000 years old. So they're older than the pyramids, they're older than Stonehenge. And it's fascinating. I mean, this one here, the bottom left, is called the Temple of Giganta, and it's called Giganta because it derives from the word giant, and they believed that giants must have made these temples to be able to move stones so big 5,000 years ago without any sort of technology that we have today. So it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and we visit the temples of Giganta and Hagar Kim, which are the two oldest and most famous on both of the islands. And then accommodation. So just to review that again, I did mention where we're staying, but the pictures on the left, you can see the hotel that we stay in Gozo, so our beachfront hotel. Lovely, straightforward, quite big rooms there, actually very spacious, basic furnishings, but very comfortable. And the pictures on the right are based in Salima on Malta. The rooms are a bit smaller there, but they have the most amazing rooftop swimming pool and rooftop breakfast bar where you can sit and look out to sea whilst you're enjoying your breakfast and getting ready for the day. So that is Malta in a nutshell. It is an 8-day trip. We stay 7 nights in comfortable accommodation, and the pace is moderate. There's sightseeing every day and a bit of free time. We sometimes change the itinerary slightly, so having the local tour leader is an absolute asset, because a lot of cruise ships do visit. There are functions and conferences that happen on the islands, and there's weather to consider as well. And the tour leader will do an itinerary that makes sense. So if you're due for your afternoon sightseeing in Valletta, but a cruise ship has come in town, then we will switch it and do one of the other activities and come back to Valletta after the cruise ship have gone. So that sort of local knowledge is invaluable to make sure you have the best sightseeing experience when you're there, regardless of what else is happening on the island. I went in November. I'd say the best time to visit is March, April, May, and then September, October, November. The summer months are really hot and very busy with the normal sort of bucket and spade beach tourists. But yeah, wonderful island, suggest you all go. And I'll probably say that after these other 2 trips as well. But what I'll do now is introduce Becky, our sales director, and she went to Sicily last year. And the Sicily holiday she's going to talk to you about can be added on directly onto the end of this trip. So you take the short flight over to Sicily and then start your week exploring there.
Hi everybody. So as Ali mentioned, my name's Becky, and I was very fortunate to go on our classical Sicily trip in October last year. As Ali mentioned, it's possible to kind of do these 2 trips back to back, and actually half of my group had already been in Malta, which was fascinating then to kind of get the contrast between the 2 islands. So the classical Sicily trip is an 8-day trip, and it is absolutely jam-packed full of highlights. In contrast to Malta and Gozo, Sicily is a very big island, not as big as Australia, but still pretty big, and it's the largest in the Mediterranean. So the days are pretty full in order to just get the absolute best out of your time there in Sicily. What I do really like about the trip, though, is that whilst it is big and we still circumnavigate the island, you do get two-night stops in the second half of the week. So we spend 2 nights in Palermo and then also 2 nights in Giardini Naxos, which is really, really nice, just so you're not moving on every single day. The island offers just a huge amount of variety. You've of course got the history of the island, both modern and classical, but you've also got picture perfect towns, just the most incredible food, and of course Mount Etna kind of looming in the background everywhere you go. What I find really interesting about Sicily is that locals do think of themselves as Sicilian first and Italian second, and they refer to the continent. You know, Italy is the continent and kind of far away, which I found interesting because obviously that's kind of how as Brits have always thought of ourselves from Europe. You know, kind of it's across the water, so very much an island nation. The trip is taken on a really roomy bus with aircon. So the maximum group size, even if we're at the maximum group size of 16 people, there's still plenty of space for you on the bus, which is nice because some of the drives are longer than on Malta. But even so, you know, you're kind of stopping along the way. I think the longest drive is between Palermo and Giardini Naxos towards the end of the trip. But you are still traveling through the most spectacular scenery. So there's always something to kind of look at and stops along the way to enjoy the towns. So the Sicily's kind of strategic location in the Mediterranean, and plus its kind of fertile soil has really put it in the kind of firmly within the crossroads of history. And you can see that influence absolutely all over the island of those different civilizations that have made the island their base kind of throughout the years. You always get a local expert guide. So along with your tour leader, when you're visiting these classical sites, you'll have a local expert guide as well. And they really do bring to life the stories of kind of the history of the place and what life was like. And just give you an idea of the scope of like all of these different civilizations that have made Sicily their home, from the Phoenicians to Carthaginians, Greeks and Romans. There's a supporting cast of Vandals and Byzantines and so many others. One of the common themes did seem to be through a lot of the stories that at some point the Spanish came along and burned a lot of stuff down, which yes, obviously kind of clearly still cuts through to the Sicilians. So on the left-hand side, you can see the site of Agrigento. And here you take a leisurely walk through what is an absolutely huge complex of ruins in a place called the Valley of Temples. A little bit of a misnomer because the Valley of Temples is actually built on a hill, but not quite sure what's going on there. Bottom left, you can see the Temple of Concordia, and that kind of dominates the skyline. You can see it coming and kind of the excitement mounts as you're getting closer to it. But one of my highlights of the trip was kind of towards the end of the walk, where you go into what I can only describe as a bit of a graveyard of ruins. There's just huge blocks of masonry from buildings that have either fallen down over the years or been destroyed, and they're just kind of scattered around. You know, some of them may be getting kind of like used to rebuild some other sites in the future, but for now they're kind of just scattered around. On the right-hand side, you can see a picture of the Teatro Greco, so the Greek theatre in Taormina. And it's just kind of right up on top of the hill, commanding just the most incredible views over the bay below. And what I just found fascinating about this place is that it's been enjoyed by theatre and concert going since the 3rd century BC, and it still continues to be used now. In fact, a few days before we arrived, Andrea Bocelli had been performing there. I'm not quite sure about my bottom sitting on those stone seats the whole time, but still an absolutely amazing place to take something in, and definitely now on my bucket list. So on to some other of the sites that you visit. So on the right-hand side, you've got some detail from the mosaics at a place called the Villa Romana, which is just absolutely incredible. 2,500 square meters of intricate mosaics. It's kind of up there as one of the best remaining examples of mosaic in the world. And there's still more to be done to uncover, you know, kind of other areas that they can excavate. You kind of weave your way through kind of specially built walkways over the mosaics, so you're getting the kind of best view as you're walking around, as your local guide is telling you kind of about the stories of the history of the villa, what the rooms were used for, and also going into more detail as to the stories told out in the mosaics. My highlight was something called the Big Game Hunt mosaic. So this hugely long room depicting all sorts of kind of animals being loaded onto boats, it looked like. And it really is a case of the more you look at it, the more you see. One of my favorite stories from it is that apparently the artisans who built the mosaics, they would immortalize their friends and family in mosaic form. So it is now on my list that I would quite like to be immortalized in mosaic form, trying to wrestle an unruly ostrich onto a boat, as you can see kind of in that bottom right hand corner, a little bit better than just getting a Polaroid of your family. On the left-hand side, you can see the site of Segesta, and that was the absolute standout highlight personally for me of the trip. A lot of the sites that you go to, you're admiring the temples from outside, and then there's barriers to stop you going in, just obviously to protect them. But actually here at Segesta, you can go into the middle of the temple, and as kind of luck may have it, timings wise, I actually got it to myself for a couple of minutes. I think obviously people were kind of wandering off to look at other things, and just kind of being able to do a real 360 degree to take in the temple, imagine what it would have looked like kind of back in the 5th century, where it was an Elenian city. And then at the top, you've got another Greek theatre kind of overlooking the hills, and then a kind of winding new road below. Onto Mount Etna. A real highlight before I went, Mount Etna was something that I really wanted to see. It's ever present when traveling through Sicily, especially in the eastern part, because on a clear day you can see it. You know, kind of when you're on your travels. It's still the most active volcano in Europe, although I suspect that Iceland's probably giving it a pretty good go at the moment. And it really is kind of otherworldly place to visit. So everybody on the trip, you can take the bus up to 1900 meters, and at the 1900 meter mark, you can get out. There's some smaller craters that you can walk to and other things that you can visit. But for those that want to do the optional excursion to go higher up the volcano, you can take a cable car and then a four-wheel drive up to 2,900 meters, which is as high as you can get. The summit's around about another 100 meters up from there. There's a lot more activity up there. You can see the craters that have been formed relatively recently. Once you get out the four-wheel drive, there's a bit of an uphill walk, which you can see in the top left, over loose ash. But despite some huffing and puffing and going bright red, as I do when I walk uphill, it was an easy walk and really, really worth it, just for those spectacular views that you could see on the right-hand side. The ground is warm underfoot in places, and yeah, you could easily, if you can kind of ignore the Mediterranean sprawling out below, you could easily think that you were on another planet. Something to mention is that we do actually have a specific walking trip in Sicily, which will do more walks around Etna, as long as some other kind of spectacular scenery in the eastern part of Sicily. So if walking is of particular interest, definitely recommend taking a look at that itinerary. So kind of onto the towns. So another element of the trip is these most incredible kind of perfect towns that look like they're either erupting out of the hillsides or they kind of hug the coast, with incredible beaches on offer. So the time, when you're at the classical sites, you always have local guides and you're getting a lot of information. When you get to the towns, your tour leader will always kind of give you an orientation walk and give you some history of the town, give you some pointers, but then you've got free time so that you can really kind of just wander around yourself, and explore what's on offer in all these kind of unique towns that you get to visit. There's kind of winding streets. You can sit down, as I did, in Ortigia and have a bit of an afternoon aperitif. Definitely recommend an Aperol on a warm Italian afternoon. Or at some places it is possible to have a quick swim as well. So here we've got kind of Ortigia in the top left, and then the top right is kind of a square where we stopped for coffee and pastries in a place called Arice. And then the bottom two pictures are of a place called Cefalù, and it's definitely a place I'm going to return to. Just a really smaller, quieter, laid back beachside town, beautiful beach, absolutely incredible scenery. It is possible to walk to the top of the rock that you can see in the bottom right hand corner, although I took the slightly less strenuous option of having a paddle instead. What's really amazing in Sicily is that it's quite easy to get off the beaten path, and it is definitely recommended. So all of these pictures were taken in a place called Taormina, which you go to towards the end of the trip. It is busy, there's no doubt about it. It's a beautiful place, so it's busy in its own, well, for good reason, especially after it was featured as the location for season 2 of the TV show White Lotus. If anybody has watched it, that was filmed in Taormina, and you can see the hotel where that was filmed and a lot of the locations around. But what I really, really loved that is, if you just get off the main street, you then can find these incredible views where you've just got the place to yourself. So don't kind of be put off too much by, kind of like the fact that it is such a popular place. It just means, yeah, turning left, deviate off that main street, and then you can see some of these really spectacular views. Onto food, and of course Italy, every area of Italy has a lot of different kind of options, and arguably is going to be the best food that you're going to come across on your travels. But I think Sicily is definitely up there as one of my favorites. I think that combination of pasta and fresh seafood, it's just a winning combo for me. There was really a lot of variety on offer in the restaurants that we went to visit, and plenty of options as well for vegetarians. There's a particular kind of dish called Norma, kind of named for a Sicilian opera. But it's a lot of vegetables, and then you can have, you know, kind of like linguine Norma and gnocchi Norma, everything Norma. We did joke that one of my group had gone the full Norma, and we felt that he ticked everything off on the itinerary. It's also great for gluten-free diets. We had somebody in my group who was gluten-free, and she found it easy to find options. In fact, I shared a very tasty gluten-free risotto with her on the first night of the trip. My favourite meal of the trip was the middle one here. It's called linguine agli agrumi, and it's pasta with a citrus and pistachio sauce. A bit unusual. I have tried to recreate it at home, admittedly with some mixed results. You're definitely not going to see the photos of that, but I definitely recommend, if you see it on the menu in Sicily, having that. There's always plenty of lunch options as well, and you do have time, you know, if you wanted to sit down and have a fuller meal, but a lot of the time we were just grabbing some street food and some lovely kind of arancini or something else on offer from a local bakery, and then still walking around and exploring the town whilst having a snack. Every town that you visit seems to have a different speciality in the bakery. And one of my favorites, you can see top left, that was back in Arice, where there is a bakery where you can kind of peer into the kitchen and see them making these incredible Genovese cakes, which are kind of a pastry filled with custard, which is then best eaten warm. So you can go next door to the cafe, grab a coffee, grab a lovely warm Genovese cake, and sit down and enjoy those. And as already mentioned, agriculture is really, really important to the island of Sicily, so much so that you'll see wheat on the flags on that orange juice stand. See the wheat kind of coming out of Medusa's head, just in recognition of just how important agriculture has been to its history and continues to be. And there's fresh fruits and juices absolutely everywhere. I definitely recommend having a lemon granita. It's kind of like a grown-up slushy, and it's perfect on a really hot day after you've kind of been doing your sightseeing. If the photos of food have got you now wanting dinner, sorry, bear with us, we've got Greece coming soon. But also do take a look at our specific food trip in Italy. So if food is something which is particularly appealing to you, we've got a specific food devoted trip in Sicily. On to accommodation, and the hotels on this trip have been picked for their location to allow us to get to these sites as early as possible. I really did lose count of the number of places where we were either the first or one of the first people into the site, enjoying a kind of quieter time to walk around and enjoy them. And then by the time we were leaving, there were huge queues of people. The car parks were full. So it's definitely worth choosing the hotel locations really carefully so that you're spending more time at the sites when it's quieter and less time in traffic. All of the hotels are en suites and clean, within walking distance of restaurants. I really enjoyed the rooftop view in a place called Piazza Armerina, so that's your photo on the left, the view from my room there. But the kind of highlight accommodation-wise is in Giardini Naxos, where you stay right on the seafront, and the rooms have views either kind of backwards towards Mount Etna or forwards over the sea and then up towards Taormina, which is kind of located around the bay. If you do want to extend, this is a great place. It's at the end of the trip, so I extended by a day and had a lovely lazy day on the beach, which was fantastic to do. And if you do extend, it's really easy to get back to the airport at the end of the trip to fly back onto wherever you're going. You can either book a private transfer through Explore, or you can hop on a local bus which goes from really nearby straight back to the airport. There really is so much that I could tell you about this trip. I've not touched on the fascinating modern history of the mafia. I've not talked about the incredible churches that we visit, but Ali will probably shout at me if I go on, because she wants to talk to you about Greece. What I will say is that the trip is absolutely perfect if you want to get a flavour for the island. If you've got a little more time, you can combine this trip with either the walking trip or the food trip, with not really much overlap in what you're doing. And there is also a 2-week trip as well. So if you do want more time to see and enjoy the history of the island, there's also a 2-week trip. Best time to go, I would say the European spring and autumn. Just kind of avoid the kind of main heat of the summer. But to be honest, it is going to be a spectacular place to kind of go all year round. I am now going to hand you back to Ali, who is going to talk to you about all things Greek island. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky. Yes, I love Sicily as well, and a granita after a long day of sightseeing is definitely the way to go. So let's talk about Greece then. So we have lots of different holidays to Greece. The one that we're going to focus on today is the Greek Island Wanderer. So this holiday starts in Athens, and then you head off to the islands using the local ferries. It's and then we island hop our way all the way down to Santorini, where the trip ends. And from there, you can easily fly to some European capitals, or take the ferry or fly back to Athens and then travel on from there. So let's go through the itinerary. So firstly, we start in Athens, and we have 2 nights there, the day you arrive and then the following day for sightseeing before we move on to the islands. It's a great contrast to see busy Athens before heading off to the islands. We'll do a walking tour with our tour leader, stroll through the streets of Athens. We get to see in a moment, there we go, we get to see the changing of the guard, and the guards are wearing a fantastic kilt-like uniforms. They have pom-poms on the end of their shoes. They walk in unison, they march out, change the guard and march back again, and it's quite the sight to see. It's great. So as well as wandering through the streets, exploring, we head up to the Acropolis, and we have a guided tour of the Acropolis, where the guide really does bring everything to life, explains the history, explains what you're looking at, and explains how the Acropolis was built and why and what it's been used for over time. We thoroughly enjoyed our tour of the Acropolis, but it was a really hot day. So just when it finished, we grabbed an ice cream and sat under a tree and had the most amazing view, looking over the Acropolis, enjoying our ice cream, cooling off before we continued to do some more sightseeing. So that was an absolute highlight for me. And then next, the islands. So this trip is really all about the islands. We use the ferries to get from island to island, which normally run like clockwork. I was really impressed with the onboard facilities. So there's really comfy seats. There's multiple places on deck where you can just sit there and enjoy endless views of the Mediterranean. And the island group that we visit on this holiday are called the Cyclades, and it's a group of about 220 islands in the Aegean. It's just southeast of mainland Greece. The islands are well known for their stunning landscapes, the whitewashed buildings, and they also have the crystal clear blue water as well. But a lot of them have got historical and cultural significance as well. And on this trip, we stay on 4 islands. But during the holiday, you can also do a day trip to Delos and Mykonos. So you can do 6 of the Cyclades by the end of the holiday if you wish to. So this picture here you can see is the first island we visit, which is Syros. And Syros to get there is actually the longest ferry ride of them all, and it's 4 hours. So and we have reserved seating, and they're much more comfortable than airplane seats. But we found that with our group, not many people actually sat in those seats for long, that everybody was up on deck, having a look around, enjoying the views and enjoying the cruise. So Syros itself is the administrative capital of the Cyclades. So it's a bit more authentic, a bit less touristy atmosphere. It's got a beautiful interior to the island. The landscapes and the villages are all absolutely stunning, but it's definitely seen as more of a cultural retreat. Whilst we're on this island, we'll have a bus tour and we visit a factory that makes lokoumi, which is very similar to Turkish delight. I'm not a huge fan of Turkish delight, but I did like the Greek version. I enjoyed that visit a lot. And then we get to see medieval Anousiros and its old castle gates. And also, whilst we're on this island, we've got the opportunity to do a coastal walk. And it's the walk, you start along the coast, head inland a little bit, walk through some olive groves, see some citrus trees, and then you're back out onto the coast again with beautiful views. And at the end of the walk, there's the opportunity to go for a swim. In your downtime on this island, you can enjoy relaxing on the beach if you wish. There's a beach very, very close to the hotel. So if, again, you finish sightseeing for the day, at the end of the day, you can have a relax on the beach near the hotel, which is lovely. After Syros, we take the short hop to Paros, and here we visit a Venetian fortress, beautiful fishing villages. We get to see the marble quarries and learn about how they excavated these giant slabs of marble and what they've been used to build around Greece and even further beyond. Here we can take a walk along the ancient Byzantine road, which stretches across the island. And there's also the opportunity at our hotel to have a cookery lesson. And the owners of the hotel are real foodies and are very keen on showing you how Greek food is made and a few traditional dishes. So there's an opportunity there if you'd like to do a cookery lesson. It's really authentic, real family feel about it, really good fun. Learn a few simple dishes and then take home with you the being able to recreate these recipes when you're at home. And the other thing that you can do from Paros is to take a cruise on a traditional wooden kaiki boat. And that's one of the, we do another holiday in the Greek islands where you spend a week aboard a traditional kaiki boat. This gives you a chance to sample that, although it's just the day trip, and see, yes, these interesting boats and how they've used and how the history's come about. Next, we hop on to Naxos, and Naxos is the largest island of the Cyclades. It's famous for, if you see in the middle picture here, the Patara stone, and this is when you come into the harbour, it's a very imposing stone structure, the gateway to the town. It's over 2,500 years old and is, yeah, the real postcard image for the island, really. And Naxos has, all of the villages have whitewashed buildings, so very traditional Greek scenes. But this was definitely my favourite island, and I didn't think the biggest island would be my favourite island, but it was. It felt quite very friendly, very personal, and Naxos town itself feels like a village because it's got a compact layout with narrow winding streets, a beautiful picturesque harbour, and I just, yeah, like I said, I love the atmosphere on the island. And our hotel is just a short walk outside of the town, which is only about 5 minutes, but it means that you've got all the shops and bars and restaurants and the beach very, very close to you, but also you're just a little bit out of the town, so you're not bothered by all the comings and goings in different times of days, early in the morning, late at night, that you might not want. So it's absolutely perfect. Great spot for us. I'm really happy that we're staying there. Whilst we're on Naxos, we do a bus tour of the island and we visit the old olive oil museum and take a walk through the olive groves, learn about olive oil production. And again, there's some more citrus plantations that we can see. We'll stop at some of the smaller villages and enjoy a coffee mid-morning and a little tasty snack in the main square, do a bit of people watching. And there's also an opportunity to go for a walk here, which is about 3 hours through farmland and to see some of the smaller villages. In Naxos, I also found that they have the best gyros in Greece, and that's kind of a wrapped kebab food item, but I'll come on to that when we talk about food at the end. And from here, you can day trip Delos and Mykonos. Delos is famous for its ancient ruins, and Mykonos is more famous really for the rich and famous who frequent the island. There's lots of boutique shops, and they've got a windmill that's probably one of the most photographed places in the Cyclades. So it's interesting to see the contrast. And then lastly on our agenda is the island of Santorini, and what a great island Santorini is. There are a lot of tourists there. It is a very popular destination. So you have to be quite clever to avoid crowds, but it's well worth doing that. And going with an Explore tour and having an Explore tour leader, you really have the know-how of how to avoid those crowds. So for example, there's a walk that we do from Fira to Ia, which walks along the caldera of the island. So the island itself was shaped by a volcanic eruption in the 2nd millennium BC, and it's resulted in a crescent-shaped archipelago. And the central part of the island is a large caldera. On the outskirts, you've got the volcano, and the other side, you see hilltop villages. So this interesting walk around the edge of the crater that has been left by the volcano that's all submerged is one of the highlights of the trip. And a lot of people do that walk. And the tour leader said to us, we're going to do that in reverse, because that way we're going against the tide of people and we're not queuing for a bus to get home at the end of the day. And we switched the walk and did it in reverse, still had the same stunning views. We had a wonderful refreshment stop halfway through where I had the most amazing lemon cake I've ever eaten in my life. And then we walked all the way back to our hotel, and it was absolutely superb. We heard stories of another group that had done it the other way around, and they'd waited 2 hours to get a bus back from Ia. So it's definitely worth doing it the way that we did. The other thing, so it's famous for the blue domed roofs, for the windmills. So these pictures are taken in Ia at the end of the walk, and you've got plenty of time to relax and have a walk around the little winding streets. It's quite popular. People go there for all sorts of reasons. And one of the things that's really trending at the moment is you have a photo shoot, and you could see people, they hire outfits like big dresses, and they were standing on the rooftops, and somebody was making, you know, the train of the dress flail up in the wind and taking photos, and it was just interesting to see. It was quite fun. For me, though, the highlight was the boat cruise that we do around the caldera. So we stop off at the volcano, and the picture on the left here is actually of the walking trail that we take onto the volcano. But we'll see in a moment on the next slide that there's the boat trip at the bottom left. That's it. So we go out on the boat, we spend a day on that, and we visit the volcano. We go onto the volcanic island, walk up to the top, see the craters, have an explanation from the local guide, come back down again, and then we go off to some thermal springs. So there's the opportunity to have a swim in the warm waters. And then lastly, at the end of the day, is we watch the sunset from the boat. And Santorini is famous for its idyllic sunsets, absolutely beautiful. There are many places to watch the sunset, but from the boat cruise is lovely. You can also watch it from Fira or Ia, but it's, you know, the pink tones and purple tones in the sky are really quite special. So food, well, yes, food in Sicily is great, and food in the Greek islands is equally fantastic. So that top left picture was the gyros I was talking about, which is kind of like a kebab, grilled meat, seasoned meat, wrapped up in a pita bread with chips and salad and tzatziki, and it's just the best go-to snack lunch to grab, in my opinion. There's all sorts of Mediterranean dips and wonderful things to snack on. Very famous dish, the moussaka, and I tried all sorts of different variations of that with and without potatoes. It's a layered minced potato and aubergine dish, but my favorite is always a Greek salad. And the vegetables just taste so much better. The onions are milder, the tomatoes are yummier, the olives are fantastic, the peppers are nice. It's just not the same as recreating at home, I found, but very much enjoyed the Greek food. And it is suitable for anybody who's vegetarian. There's plenty of vegetarian dishes. There are some vegan food options, but it's a bit more limited, and definitely gluten-free diets can be catered for as well. The other thing actually to mention here would be the wine tasting. So on this trip, we visit a local vineyard on Santorini and have a wine tasting experience. And it's really interesting to learn because it's a volcanic island, and obviously one that has a lot of sun, and water evaporation and irrigation is a big issue. And they dig holes in the ground and put the vine in the ground, and the vine sort of coils around that hole rather than being trained up a traditional type structure, which is what we're used to with other European grape growing techniques. So interesting to learn about that, but also lovely to try some delicious wine. So on to accommodation. We stay in a variety of hotels. They're all twin share ensuite, comfortable properties, clean, functional, fantastic. The two highlights for me were the one in Athens, which are the top two photos. I mean, spaces of a premium in Athens, so the rooms again are fairly small, but we're not there for long. You're out all day. But they had a breakfast bar there, which you can just about make out in the top right picture, that you can see the Acropolis from the breakfast terrace, and that also turns into a bar at night time. So that was fantastic. Sit there, views of the Acropolis, enjoy your breakfast. And the other one I really liked was on the Santorini, and we stay in a place called Cartarados, just outside of Fira. And it's beautiful white villas around a stunning swimming pool, nice and quiet and peaceful. It was the perfect retreat at the end of the day. And all of our accommodations on this trip are either a 2-minute walk from the beach or have a pool, if not both. So really, really nice, especially on a hot day, to be able to cool off at the end. So that's really our whistle-stop tour of the Greek islands. It is a 2-week holiday, pace moderate. We have 10 nights in comfortable accommodation, 3 nights in simple accommodation, and it's just, that one is the same. It's ensuite bathrooms. It's just slightly more basic furnishing, so we've graded it as simple. The best times to travel are May and June, and then September and October. There are more crowds in September, so if you want to avoid as many people as possible, then I'd head there probably in May. And if you liked the idea of this, but maybe this trip wasn't exactly the one for you, we also have 2 walking holidays in Greece. One which is a walking holiday of the island of Crete, that's a week long. Another one is a walking holiday of the island of Corfu, and that one can be done as a 2-week holiday, or you can just do half of it and do 1 week, come back and do the other half another time. And if you're very interested in the culture and the history of Greece in general, then we have the Peloponnese Explorer, which is a 2-week holiday, touring around the Peloponnese and going a bit more in depth on the history front. So that's it for me to talk to you about Greece. I will hand you back to Steph. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Ali and Becky. That was amazing. I am amazed at the historic sites that we visit on these tours and the location of our accommodation being right in the center of our destination. Absolutely amazing. We do have a couple of questions coming through about language. Just to clarify, all the local tour leaders will speak the local language and are happy to help you learn a bit or translate for whatever you want. If you can't wait to start planning a trip, like I can't, because I can tell you right now, Malta's now on my hit list also. We'd love to talk to you about Europe tours. So please get in touch with us or your preferred travel agent at any time. Moving on, now all of these trips might have you excited and you might want to do more than one like I do. So there is a way to extend or combine tours, which the ladies have both spoken about throughout. I know I'm particularly looking forward to Greece, and like I said, also have my eye on Malta now. So that's actually one of our top selling trips. If you're like me and you want to do both, touch base with our team or your usual travel agent about date matching or the exciting combinations that we can put together for you both this year. And we even have some new tours coming in the new year as well. During the presentation, we've had lots and lots and lots of questions and some great feedback, which is lovely to see. We've been answering as many as we can, but we do have some of those questions we want to take a moment to talk to you about now. And we'll also be selecting someone at random to win our prize draw soon. So I'm going to pass back to Ali and Becky just to answer some of your questions that they've been asking us, that you've all been asking us, and then we'll come back and announce the winner.
I think I'll take that first question. And I think there was one there that said, when's the best time to travel to Malta? It's quite a busy island. Lots of tourists do go there. I found that the end of October, so the very end of the season, was the best time to visit. It's got a bit quieter there. You've still got blue skies and warm weather, and you'd be unlucky to get a day of rain. But if you're wanting to travel to avoid crowds, then at the end of October. If you're wanting spring flowers, blossom, and a bit more colour to these, what are in essence dry islands, then I would say go in March or April, around at springtime.
Lovely. So ooh, I'm on mute, I think. Oh no, not on mute. We're all good. So I think there was a question still about dietary requirements in Sicily. And as I touched on, it's really good for kind of any kind of dietary requirements. We had vegetarians, we had a vegan on the trip, and also somebody who required gluten-free. And what's really common now, you get to see kind of gluten-free pasta options in a lot of places in Sicily, and actually just kind of more widely in Italy as well. So yeah, you're not going to have trouble finding something for your kind of dietary requirements. Breakfasts tend to be kind of buffet style, continental buffet. So again, just plenty of different options for everybody.
Wonderful. The next question is, how warm does it get in April and September in the Cyclades? So good question. I mean, seasons are really shifting at the moment, so having a predictable weather is quite hard, but around April time you should have temperatures in the low 20s, and September can still be really hot, so you could have low 30s temperatures around that sort of range. But we're finding in the Mediterranean that it is getting warmer a bit later and staying hot longer is kind of the trend that's happening at the moment. We've got one more question here. Are there time for swims in Malta and Sicily? In Malta, yes, there is, and you can swim from right in front of both of the hotels. So depending on, yes, what you're doing in the day, whether you want to have a dip in the morning or if you want to come back and have a cool off at the end of the day. But there's quite a lot of free time in Malta. So normally every day you'll be able to fit it in. I know on Sicily, it's a much busier itinerary, mainly due to the size of the island. You've got a lot more traveling to do, and so you don't have as many opportunities for swimming on that trip, although on a few of the days it will be possible.
And then there's also a question just in general about solo travelers on our trips. I mean, these trips, along with all of our trips, are always a great option for solo travelers. I tend to travel by myself. And you've got an option. So when you're traveling solo, you can either go for the single room option, kind of an additional supplement, which I tend to do. I like my own space at the end of the day. Or alternatively, you can book on a twin share basis, and we will room you with somebody of the same sex who's also going on the trip. And so it's a kind of good way to kind of keep within budget, and also you've got a ready-made buddy kind of in your roommate on the trip. And kind of certainly on my Sicily trip and just generally on the trips that I travel on, it's kind of half and half between the people who are traveling solo, actually a bit more than half traveling solo versus people who are traveling either as couples or friends.
We do have one final question that's just popped up. So do you also help with airfares to and from our tours? Currently in Australia, for our Australian office, we do not. And the reason we don't is because being Australia and going to Europe, we often find that everyone likes to book their own travel. Maybe something coming in the future, but currently at the moment, we don't. But the team will still be answering questions in the Q&A. So if you want to keep asking questions, feel free to pop them in there. We just don't want to hold you up for too long. So we'll be sharing some of the most frequently asked questions and the event recording on the email out later on this week. But of course, we're always just a call away, and so is your local travel agent who are well in tune with what Explore has to offer. Before we get moving, we do have an exclusive event offer. I just wanted to let you know that we're currently running a European getaway sale. So if you're planning your Europe adventure, you might want a moment to check this out and book your next holiday with us. You have until the 26th of March, and we currently have 20% off selected trips. So something to take a look at. So we have one lucky winner who will win a lovely case of wine from our sustainable winery that we've sourced based on being a B Corporation. So we've selected someone at random, and I'd like to say a big congratulations to Rebecca Owens. We'll be in touch by our email to get your prize sorted. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone for joining us. Please look out for the email in the next few days and a recording and a short feedback survey. I hope you all enjoyed yourself and have a great day, and hopefully we'll be speaking to you all soon.